Welcome to Trigger Proof with Mikki Bey, the podcast that helps you stop reacting and start responding. I'm your host, Mikki Bey, emotional regulation coach, speaker, and guide. Each week, we'll explore real stories, practical tools, and conversations that will help you stay calm, confident, and in control, no matter what life throws your way. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited, you guys. It has taken years to put this together, and I mean literal years. It is really because I wanted this to be a place where you can come to learn about stories from real people who have experienced some real stuff in life and how they have used emotional regulation to navigate all of life's challenges. So I have some amazing guests for you, and the guest that I have for you today is really family to me. This person is actually the genesis of why I wanted to do this podcast from the first part, from the beginning anyway. And the reason is because this person, A, is just so resilient, and B, has been such an inspiration to me and has given me great advice over the years, whether it's been personal advice, relationship advice, career advice. He's really one of the people that I really value what he thinks. And you're going to hear why in just a moment. But I have my friend, my family here with me today, Daniel Rodriguez.
I'm honored. I appreciate it.
I am so happy to have you here. Dan, tell the people about yourself. I know that's a loaded question because you are so dynamic, but just give us a couple highlights about who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about what we're going to hear about your story today.
Sure. So originally I was born in New York City, grew up in a predominantly sheltered household. And the pros and cons of that is you stay out of trouble. And the cons is you're not necessarily like one of the most social people in the world. But I think my parents kind of they instilled a lot of working hard and focusing on education. And through that, I was able to get to MIT. I majored in computer science there. I also loved the arts growing up. So, post MIT, I tried to go out to LA and I was attempted to be an actor for a little while. That didn't work out the way that I thought. And then ultimately got back into the whole computer tech industry and consulted and worked for a couple of startups and major entertainment companies over the years. So that's kind of like me on the career academic work front. And then on the adventure side of things, like after trying my hand at acting for a while, I got into a lot of adventure related activities like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I got into skydiving, sailing, diving, and now I'm settling and slowing down a little bit, really for the most part, focusing on photography. So that's kind of like a little bit of my interests, but major part of my story and a lot of those activities helped me throughout my life is just kind of dealing with cancer, which is predominantly going to be the focus of our conversation today. And like a lot of the lessons that I learned going through the challenges of dealing with cancer over the last 13 years. So yeah, it's kind of like a little bit about me.
Thank you so much. There's so many places I could dive in.
Sure.
But I want to dive in really with the last thing that you said, which is your cancer diagnosis. So first of all, just take us back to when you first got that diagnosis and how old were you? What type of cancer is it? And you said it's been 13 years. So just take us back to that moment where you hear you have cancer. What happens next?
Yes, this is 2012. I feel like I'm in the peak of my adulthood, peak of my independence, working in tech at the time in Los Angeles. And I used the restroom one day and there's blood in the toilet. And that kind of was a little bit of a shock to me. I ended up going to the doctor, and then that doctor referred me to another one who referred me to another specialist. And next thing I know, I'm getting diagnosed with colorectal cancer, which was a complete shock to me. It was like I mentioned, 2012, and at the time I was 33 years old. I know that my family, there hasn't been a huge history of having cancer. My mom's mom, she had a breast cancer at one point in her life. Actually, it was either breast cancer or lymphoma, I forget. But I know that she had it at one point and she ended up passing away from it. And I grew up in a generation where people didn't generally talk about a lot of their health problems. And for me, at least going through it and dealing with it, I didn't want to have that same story. And I was very vocal and just let a lot of people know from the jump, a lot of people that were family, obviously, and then friends in my life. And I just wanted to lean into the community that I had And I think a lot of my getting through the whole journey, I think I can attribute to just doing that. And depending on my friends at various stages in time.
I think we've all had the moment in life where we think something like this could happen. I think most of us have someone in our life who has had some type of health challenge. And I know when I was in corporate, one of my favorite people, a leader in the company, had breast cancer. And she came back and told us when she came back from her treatment that it was one of the best things that ever happened to her.
Mhm.
And that sounds oxymoronic because when we think the typical healthy person, right, thinks about hearing they have cancer or have something that could potentially take our lifespan away, maybe prematurely, or what we would think would be prematurely. I don't think anyone's thinking of the gifts that come along with the diagnosis of knowing that there's a possibility that your lifespan could be cut short. Did you find any of those types of things in your journey? Have you found like the, for lack of a better term, like silver lining or the gifts that have been a part of the journey as well versus just the dealing with having the cancer and the treatments and all of that?
Yeah, 100%. I think everybody's going to go through their initial shock. I think a lot of times when we think about diseases of this nature, this is like something that we feel like may come into play like later on in life. It's a generational thing. A lot of people don't really talk about being sick when, especially when you're young, you just muscle your way through it and you keep it to yourself. A lot of times you don't really want to show weakness. And I had an uncle that had lung cancer, for instance, and nobody knew anything that he had this particular diagnosis. And he was in his 50s. And we found out about it a week before his passing. And that's what that goes back to what I was mentioning in terms of wanting to make sure that I didn't necessarily do that, go that route. But you know, people are gonna handle it in various different ways. But with respect to your question, yeah, it's an interesting thing looking like death in the face because a lot of times you get a disease, you don't really know what the outcome is going to be. There are cancers that are a little bit indolent, like mine has been over the years, and then there's cancers that are super aggressive, and you don't really know hand you've been dealt until like you've actually started interacting with the doctors and your body is processing it. I guess the gift and the silver lining that you get from that scenario is that, at least for me anyway, was that I was not as averse to risks at that particular time. I almost gave myself permission to take more risks. As it was, I was like a pretty risk. I wouldn't say I was the most risk averse person in general. I majored in computer science to quit and not use my degree and go to LA to try to be an actor. And so that a lot of people thought I was crazy for doing that. I think doing this, having this diagnosis made me even more so willing to take and jump at life and try new things and whatnot. And so one of the activities that I actually got into not too long after finding out about my diagnosis was base jumping. Now it was something that I had planned to do early on, but having this diagnosis increased the urgency for me to get that done. I feel like it also made me want to live life a lot quicker because like retirement was not at least in my mind, was not going to be in the cards. I wasn't going to have until I was 60 to go and travel the world. If I wanted to do something, I literally have to do it like right now. So it like puts that match under you, and I think speeds up a lot of that process. And I think that was probably the biggest benefit that I got from it.
So I have to mention this because this is one of the reasons you have been so inspirational to me. I have watched you do this over the past 5 years that we've been friends. I've seen you become a pilot. I've seen you become a stunt car driver. I've seen you become a comedian. I have seen, I mean, so many different things. And then you already have been in jujitsu and you're so active and you hike and you do all of these, you scuba dive. I mean, literally any and every activity there is to do that most people have on their bucket list, you have done. And I just find it so remarkable. Not even that because of the cancer, but that may have started you off on it. But I want to know like the mindset that doing all of those different things that have their own unique languages to them that you have to learn and be proficient at. These are not soft skills. Like the things that you choose are hard. And I mean, one of those things. So I want to know, like, from a mindset perspective, with cancer in the background, of course, what have those type of activities done for you on an emotional level, right? Because I would think a lot of these things have adrenaline attached to it, have some risk attached to it. So what is the mindset of why you're doing these things from an emotional standpoint?
Yeah, a lot of these activities are like my therapy. They're my therapy in the sense that the kind of like the common thread between a lot of them has always been it forces me to be present. And when I'm present, I'm not in my mind thinking about like the self-loathing or worrying about like what could happen in the future or whatever. Literally being forced to live in that moment. And even pre-cancer, working out and doing jujitsu were things that actually more so doing jujitsu than working out, honestly, things that forced me to be present. Because when you got a guy that's like basically trying to like choke you out or put you in an arm lock or whatever, like you have to be like present versus like sometimes when I go to the gym, like I'm breaking out my phone and I'm like doom scrolling and things like that. But yeah, they helped me like cope and deal with like things that I was like going through in the past. And I think for me, like when I was like doing base jumping is another example of like I don't have time to pick up my phone and worry about something. So I think that's what helped me and why those activities specifically helped me cope and deal with it.
Okay, so Dan, so probably 90% of my audience is going to be women.
Right.
Let's extract this a little bit. And I'm not an athlete at all.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, tell us what base jumping is.
Okay.
And then also, if you could, and I could help with this, but if you could extract the principles from those things into how someone like who's not an athlete could get the same benefit, right? Could maybe do something that jujitsu and base jumping and piloting and all these things have done for you. How could the average person who is not going to do that extract the principles that you get out of it?
Yeah, I think it's any activity, honestly, that forces you to be present. Like we used to do so many things that didn't involve computers and tech back in the day, whether it was like spending time with family, whether it was cooking, whether it was like playing games, like going out into nature, into the park and things like that. And now it's just like we get so distracted by a lot of the tech that we have in our life. I feel like some activities more than others force you to be more present. Some like walking through a park. If you are the type of person that, has a specific practice and you've been working on it, like for some people, it's focusing on their breath when they're doing these activities. Something like that for me, I've used, but it's still difficult, difficult as a practice just because for whatever reason, that specific practice isn't intense enough to me out of my thoughts. But for others who are like more who actually have built it into their life and made that a practice, that may be something that's super helpful and it's very simple to do. For some people, it's journaling. For some people, there's a number of things, but I think the biggest thing is just being present within the activity. So it doesn't necessarily require any level of athleticism. Honestly, like singing karaoke has been one of the funnest things to do just because like, you're up on stage and you're just, it's actually more breath work too. If you think about it, you're expelling air, you're letting out emotion as you're like singing. And then you're almost a lot of times like music brings you back into a moment of joy or whatever. And so those type of activities can be very therapeutic. And to answer your other questions though, with respect to base jumping is basically a form of skydiving. So back in the day, my brother sent me this video of these guys jumping off, doing this crazy stuff, jumping off mountains with wingsuits and things like that. And me just like being like monkey see, monkey do, I was like, oh, I want to do that. And so that was like a whole progression that I had to focus on and study to get to that point. Also, a lot of times people like see me do all these like crazy activities and they're like, why do you have time to learn and do X, Y, Z stuff? And they're all very much related in the sense of, I think jujitsu provided a foundation where I understood my body and I understood like how I move in space. And then skydiving is like another level of that because I actually have another dimension that I'm working with, like the Z axis versus just like and so it's just like another level of body awareness. And then I'm dealing with gear. I'm dealing with my parachute and my wingsuit. And diving is exactly like skydiving, except instead of the air, you're in a different element. You're in water. And so a lot of my activities, I feel like they build on each other. even doing acting and performance art is very much related to that. Like you have to know how to stand, how to speak at the right time, the correct intonations and things like that. It's a lot of body awareness stuff. And so the activities that I've done have been able to layer it on top of each other. I guess something that would be a completely tangent thing was if I wanted to paint. Like that's like using a different side of my brain than I've used in the past. But yeah, that's like how all those things have worked together.
What about photography now, though? You've got that
Yeah,
creative
exactly. Yes,
outlet.
so the photography thing, that is probably the furthest from all of these other activities, but it is something that actually my grandfather, my mother's father used to be a photographer, so there's a little bit of a history with that. Having gone to LA and try to be an actor, i.e., in front of the camera, at some point, I also wanted to learn like the going ons of the back of the camera. So tangentially, like that type of technology and that type of experience I had like a little bit of exposure to. So it's not like super foreign, but it's not a lot of body awareness stuff. It's more like trying to capture a moment of somebody else. And then there's other levels of printmaking and post-production stuff, like messing with things in Photoshop. I like to deep dive into stuff if it's not already apparent. And when I'm learning things, I think that is very therapeutic for me. And I think just being a lifelong learner is has been like joy. So that's why you see me jumping from all these into all these different activities.
I love it. So as you're talking, I'm in my mind, it's taking me to like mind, body, spirit, right?
Mhm.
I think you have like really mastered the plane of the physical. Like for me, it's
Mhm.
easier for me to master like mental and spiritual for me, like
Right.
spirit meaning self. And
Sure.
so I have struggled with the physical aspect. And as you lost 125 pounds,
Yeah.
what my body can do now still shocks me. Like
Yeah.
I'm almost afraid to see how much I can do now because I'm so used to not being able to do something, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like how far you can push your body, right? And
Mm.
how far you can go and you've pushed it to multiple limits and also your mind like very like even just the work that you do like for real life money. You have a very cerebral kind of job. And so
Yeah.
I'm wondering for you, like from the spiritual plane, because it sounds like a lot of these things thrust you into it because of the presence. Like I would consider that to be spiritual. When
Mhm.
you think of like the mind, body, spirit, what, if anything, is like a spiritual moment for you? And by spirit, you can redact that to be whatever you want to call it. But
Right.
I really mean it as connection to self. How do you really get into that connection to essence of who you are, not the personality of Dan?
Yeah, that's something that I think I'm still very new to. I agree with you 100% with regarding looking at all those three categories, like my mental and physical things I feel like I've mastered very well. And I think I still have a lot of work to do on the spiritual side of things. Like I'm not a religious person at all. I feel like I've studied a lot of different philosophies and I'm still trying to learn and find my way in that different realm. I have a lot of questions that I feel like haven't been answered and I'm still like searching if that makes sense. But I think with respect to connection of self, like moments that I feel like I have felt that the most is those moments where I'm just like doing one of my activities and I just get lost in it. It's like the sense of like how other people describe it as flow, right? It's just like you are doing things and they just seem effortless. You're not really thinking about it. You're not being super cerebral about it. You're not thinking about how your body is moving. And that's like the essence, I think, of talking about.
Yes.
And a lot of those activities have helped me reach that in like little sparks, but there's been nothing that has had that kind of like constant feeling for me. Still, like everybody, I feel like I'm a work in progress. So
Yeah.
I think maybe that's an area that you can teach me in.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
You're thinking that. I'm like,
Yeah, totally.
reason I say that is because I, like I said, I spent so much time like on the other levels where
Sure.
I'm just now getting to a place where I have a movement practice. Worked out this morning, that never at 7:30 in the morning. I am a new person, like when it
Yeah.
comes to moving my body. And I feel like an infant. And it's very a fish out of water. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just doing something and moving my body. And I always feel better for doing it.
Mhm.
What I tell my clients is if you can only do one, do physical. And even though that was not what I did it
Mm-hmm.
the opposite way. But I tell them, if you can only do one, do physical, because by proxy, you end up hitting the other two anyway, which is really what you just described. You have the mental component, because there is a mental component to physical activity where
Sure.
you're pushing yourself, you're talking to yourself, you have that self-talk. And then there's also the spiritual, which is what you call the flow
Yeah.
state, where you
Yeah.
are suspended and you really are sometimes even having an out-of-body experience. And
Yeah.
in psychology, they call that like a peak experience. So people
Mm.
might have that when, say, for instance, you have a baby, or there are these kind of like huge life things that happen, and it's a split second, but for that split second, you forget that like you're in this experience,
Sure.
right? You're just suspended. And so I am just now in my own life finding the value and really the courage to
Mm.
move physically to really integrate all three. So I would say, I would venture to say, from the work that I do when I talk to people, that you are naturally strong in one area. At least most people are naturally strong in one
Mm.
area. For me, I have amazing spiritual fortitude that
Sure.
has just always come very easy to me.
Yeah.
And when it came to mental, that was something I had to develop. I actually, little tangent here, but
Sure.
I just found out I am neurodivergent
Really?
in a way. Yes. So I went to this, I spoke at a conference, a women's conference, and I have not been diagnosed. So let me say that I have not been
Okay.
diagnosed. I'm diagnosing myself, but let me tell you.
Right.
So I went to a women's conference over the weekend. I was speaking, and there was a doctor there talking about neurodivergence in Black women and how so many of us don't get diagnosed, and we usually don't realize we're neurodivergent until grad school. That is exactly
Mm.
what happened to me. When I was in grad school, I felt, oh my God, I'm dumb. Like, why is this so hard for me? I was not picking up on it at all. And it took a friend of mine who I've been friends with my whole life to actually say to me, you don't remember you're dyslexic. And I
Mm.
was like, oh my God, I have been compensating, which is true, but I have been compensating for my dyslexia since I was a child.
Mm.
I never got help for it. So I just had to learn
Right.
essentially how to read in a way that allowed me to comprehend, because it was so difficult for me. Now, obviously, I excelled. I have a journalism degree, I have an MBA, and all of
Yeah.
that. But finding out that dyslexia is actually a part of neurodivergence was mind blowing to me. And
Mm.
it really just almost made me cry, because
Mm.
we are a lot, people in general, like we all got something. We all got
Yeah.
something. And when I realized it, the work that I do in emotional regulation, so much of emotional regulation could be on the neurodivergent scale as well. And so hearing like all of these things come together, it was like this aha moment for me,
Yeah.
where suddenly things in my life made sense. And actually, when I found emotional regulation, it was one of those things, because all throughout my life, I've always been told you're too much, you too much passion, and tone it down, and all of
Mm.
this. And what happens with women who are neurodivergent, or girls, I should say, is
Right.
that we become very compliant.
Mm.
And so we start masking, because the boys are getting in trouble. They get behavior issues, so they get diagnosed early.
Mm.
But girls end up basically masking life. And this goes through, like I said, graduate school, through career, through relationships. And
Mm.
so this was just mind blowing to me to hear that, wow, this is something I could have. And this is something that is affecting me. And potentially, I'm also helping people who have they're somewhere on the spectrum
Mm.
of neurodivergence.
Yeah.
Anyways, little tangent. But I want to get back to something you said earlier at the beginning about you were being very vocal in your cancer journey. And you
Mm.
were telling a lot of people, and you felt like community was something important to you. So, being Puerto Rican, being from New York, being a
Mm.
man, this was very counter your culture, right? And you
Yeah.
mentioned you had an uncle who literally didn't say anything to anyone. So I want to know, like, how did you manage or did you manage the emotions of the people around you while you're also probably feeling a lot of emotions? So, A, what were the emotions you were feeling? And then how did you manage the feelings of all of these people who are in your community who may have had a range of emotions hearing your diagnosis as well? And even up until this day. 13 years later?
So I think, so how was I managing my emotions? So yeah, like coming from, I'm a very independent person, and it took a little while to get used to depending on others. I think it was interesting. It was like perfectly set up so such that it was easy. It was like life, like the universe made it easy for me to just do that and be okay with it. So to give you like a little bit of the details of that, there was a point in time when I was living in Los Angeles that I was living on a boat, right? This was like when I was learning how to sail, and also I wanted to save some money. So I moved out of my apartment and bought a boat in Marina Del Rey and was living on it for a period of time. The thing is like small and cramped and all that other stuff. And this is actually when I found out that I had my cancer diagnosis. And first I was really like pushing back in terms of wanting to do the gold standard of treatment, because for me, the gold standard of treatment essentially, which was getting a full colostomy, doing radiation, and doing chemotherapy. The radiation and the chemotherapy I could probably get my head around and be fine with, but the full colostomy basically meant that I was gonna have problems skydiving and doing jujitsu, which were two of my basically main outlets at that period of time. So I didn't really do any kind of treatment until 3 or 4 months later, after my diagnosis or whatnot. And my friends were getting on me and all this other stuff, and the cancer was getting like a little bit worse. And I guess I'm a little bit lucky because a lot of people who would have taken that path, it may not have gone as good or as easy for them as it was for me. But things being what they were, I had a lot more time to think about it and process it. And one of my friends was just put his foot down, had me talk to a couple of people, eventually convinced me to do, the radiation and chemo. And during that part of time, like I was staying with him, he was like, "You're gonna stay with me at my house, or whatever." And also, this is like a guy that I would go to his place and watch basketball games. So we were like really tight and stuff like that. And he was just like, "This is what you're gonna do." And I'm like, "All right, fine. I'm not gonna argue with you." And then I think through that 2 months of staying with him, it just got me a little bit more comfortable depending on somebody. And then so a later treatment, I ended up staying with another friend when I was still in LA. And then subsequently, like later on, staying with when I moved to Atlanta, I was flying up to New York to do treatments in New York City at MSK. And I was staying with one of my friends in Brooklyn. So I just became okay with leaning on friends. And I'm also very fortunate that my friends had space to basically like let me stay with them, period. It was just like a perfect setup in that respect. And even now, because I'm still going through, like literally I'm in the middle of a chemo cycle, when these like last couple of chemo cocktails that I was on haven't been working, I reached out to like, my network, and just like started to ask them if they have suggestions or if they know people that are familiar with any clinical trials that I may be a candidate for, and it's running its course. That's like the evolution of me like learning how to depend on people. Now, I've got like a lot of alpha type people who are like problem solvers. I went to MIT. A lot of my fraternity brothers were at MIT, Harvard, or Tufts. And these guys, like, they're problem solvers, they're leaders, they're trying to they're all about getting things done. And they're all about, and people have been used to leaning on them when there's like crises and stuff like that. And that they feel like they want to help when those types of scenarios happen as well. Yet again, another thing that I'm very fortunate to have, like my network, because that's a very special crew. But so there's like a twofold thing. When I lean on them, I trust them, but I have to get them to understand that I am also one of those people, and also get them to trust me in terms of like my judgment ultimately, and the choices that I made and the decisions that I go down. So in the very, very beginning, it was a little overwhelming because you let people know you have this diagnosis and everybody's bombarding you with the same questions. So what I did was I made like a blog with some, like basically like an FAQ of what was going on, just so everybody knew the general aspects, and that if there was something specific that I didn't cover in that, people can ask me. But I pleaded with them to first go on there and read that, and then if there was anything not on that, then ask me questions, because it became very repetitive on the information stuff. And then so that was kind of like one boundary that I set, that was keeping them in the loop, but also keeping my mental stability when not having to do that constant answering of questions. And then when it came to the other types of friends who were more on the concerned, worrying type of thing, like a little bit of like calming them down, because I always felt like I had to do that in the beginning. But I think because they've seen me go through it so many times, there was also a little bit of them calming their own nerves, because they see that, okay, I'm still here. It's been 13 years of dealing with it, so I'm doing something right. And a lot of them are like, even though I let them know that I'm going through another cycle, they're like, okay, you got this. And if you need us, they know that I will go to them or whatever. And I'm constantly like trying to keep people in the loop. So I think that's really good. I saw this thing with Simon Sinek and Trevor Noah, and they were talking about friends. And at the end of the day, like what marks somebody as your friend is they want to be able to be there for you. And it's exactly like the marriage thing. They want to be there in good times and in bad times or whatever. And the only way that they're going to be able to be there in bad times is if you give them the opportunity to. So to be a good friend, you have to allow them to help you. So I think leaning on them is important. But I also think that like setting those boundaries is like important as well.
I love that. I'm like welling up, like thinking about that, because most of the people that are going to be watching this are like us, like they're high achieving people.
Sure.
And unfortunately, one of the downsides of that is we are very self proficient, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, like we're independent people. We think we can do most of it on our own. And so, I mean, I'm even guilty of this, of just suffering in silence and doing my own thing and like trying to figure it out. And I really applaud you for fighting through that, because I know what your makeup is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being able to allow your community to support you, because you're exactly right. I mean, people who love you want to be there and support, but also from the outsiders, people who are outside of Dan's body, right? Everybody else, you don't want to infringe either. So it's
Sure.
like you do have to have like that invitation to say, yes, I'm open to help. I'm open to support. I'm open to, and I think that's something that everybody can take. Like, you may not be going through cancer, but I went through a divorce 2 years ago. I didn't really reach out to anybody. Actually, one of my best friends was like, I had no clue that you were like going
Yeah.
through it like that, right?
Yeah. And
And
they get mad too. It's
yeah,
like, how could you not tell me?
and it's not malicious. I think
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's not malicious, but I think, and look, there's some shame with that too, because I know better.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know better. I know not to isolate. I know that I should be reaching out. But sometimes when you're in the throes of life situations, you're doing all you can do to just make it through. So the last thing on your mind is necessarily, like you said, updating everybody on what's going on.
And some of it too is just we're programmed to think that we can't tell people these things. It's like there's this society, just like there's shame sometimes in not telling people about their shame in the fact that you can't you feel like you can't tell somebody.
Yeah.
Because like divorce, if you're old school, like nobody get divorced. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You dealt with it.
And then Dan, I'm a life coach. So
Yeah,
exactly. There's like all of these different layers. Sure. Obviously, I got over that and I speak about it freely now, but it was a thing. And so I love to hear you say this, because for the men that will watch this, I think it's important to see someone like you say, no, I didn't just suffer in silence, and I did call on my village, and I continue to call on my village. And like yesterday, I happened to see this clip of Gucci Mane and his wife talking about him struggling with mental health. He has schizophrenia, which I did not know.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and he was talking about how his wife over the years has really helped him through this, and therapy and medication and all of these things. And I was like, wow, look at this Black man he was on a Breakfast Club with his wife talking about this. And I was just like, thank you, Lord. People are going through things.
Sure.
And I think one of the reasons I've been so public about my life is not because I feel like I just want to share everything I'm going through, but I know I'm not the only one. Right. I'm one of the people I feel is called to live out loud, whether I want to or not, because my mission is to help people know that you can feel better regardless of what your external circumstances are. Yeah. So sometimes that means I have to be the poster child
Yeah.
for going through some things. So I was just so happy to hear that. And I think this conversation will do some of that as well, where people are just like, okay, I can go through hard things, I can be vocal about it and get support or not. Because just because you are vocal doesn't mean that there will be necessarily the network that you have.
Yeah.
But I truly believe that when we change the story of no one's going to be there to support me, that support shows up even from strangers.
Sure.
You don't, it doesn't have to be like you have this robust, like you happen to be a part of a lot of different communities where you can be supported, and everybody may not have that. But ultimately, if you can open yourself up to the idea of being supported in whichever way that support can come from, I do believe that you will find support.
Yeah, and
Just
just to add, because I know you brought up like one of the things that made it hard to say anything is like you're a life coach, right? Yeah, just because you're a life coach doesn't mean you're immune to life.
exactly.
It's like there are like there are doctors that get sick.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There are safety people that have accidents. It's just like just because you're an expert in something doesn't mean that you are immune from asking for help, doesn't mean that you're immune from give yourself permission to be like, okay, I can be vulnerable even in spite of the fact that I'm a leader in this particular field or what have you. I think that's an important detail that sometimes people feel like they can't give themselves permission to do that stuff because it'll look like weakness or ignorance or any number of the things that people, any number of the labels that people.
Yes. Yeah. I want to say this one other thing before we close out. Yes. And I did. It was delayed
Sure.
because for me at that, I was just, it was just so counterintuitive to what I thought life was going to be. Like I had I had it all planned out. And I felt like for a lot of the things I had done it, quote unquote. So there was also that kind of high achiever thing going there too. Like I didn't want to fail at something and I wanted to do everything I possibly could so that I could at least mentally be like, I did everything I could do. And sometimes even our best, you still end up with an outcome that maybe was not desirable. So I want to ask a question about that. And then I have one other question I want to ask you. So like when people are going through these huge life changes, like for you, it was cancer, for me, it was divorce, and it's been a lot of grief. I've lost both my parents and different things have gone on in my life as well. What would you say is like the piece of advice you would give someone when something like absolutely life altering happens to them? What advice could anybody take just from what you've been through in your life?
Yeah, so I think there's two big things that people tend to happen is there's the why me, and typically the why me is associated with you having a preconceived plan in terms of how your life should have been, and your life is not going in that trajectory anymore, or because this monkey wrench happened or whatever. And it's like, why is this happening to me? And so I think part of it is not necessarily getting married to these goals or plans or destinations we feel like we have, not getting married to the result or what you want the result to be. In Buddhism, it would be like associated with being detached, but it's not being detached in the sense that you're like detached from life. I think that's like the misconception about it. I think it's more just being detached from, it's okay to aspire to things and it's very positive to aspire to things. But the fact of the matter is, it's never going to look like the way you think it's going to look like. And I think a lot of times these particular events make that more apparent. But yeah, I think not being married to the result is one thing. And the other thing is just embrace it. It's just, there are a lot of doors that open up for you mentally and also just like in life when you embrace certain things. Like for me, it was being more open to risk. And there was some risks that I also took in my job too, because I was basically like, oh, I told my job, I don't think I was I was contracting at Sony at the time. And I was basically like to my boss, this is what's going on in my life or whatever. And I got to go travel while I can. And his response, I thought his response was going to be like, okay, thanks, see you later, whatever kind of thing. And I was also going to be like, well, you need me to help train the next guy, whatever. But his response was like almost like the complete opposite. He was like, okay, I understand you're going through this stuff. I want to support you. Here's a hot spot. You don't have to work in the office anymore. Go out and do whatever you need to do. And that's been like my story in terms of my career. I haven't been in an office since 2012. And it was interesting, like when people were dealing with the pandemic in terms of like working home and all this stuff, I was like, I've been doing this for a long time. You guys are just dealing with this kind of trauma. and this was the open door. The open door was like working at home. There's going to be some growing pains associated with that. But that was something that I experienced a long time ago. And that was a door that opened a long time ago from just embracing it. And many other things have opened, many other doors have opened, things that I didn't expect to happen. Like you see me like do all these crazy things that whether improv or stand-up comedy, like things that I didn't think that I was going to have time for in my life, but they came. So I just keep it on.
You got more days. You got more hours in the day. You got like Oprah and Beyonce hours in your day. I don't know.
Nah, I don't have any. I just don't have any kids.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
One last thing I want to end on this because it was such a pivotal piece of advice you gave me. I called you one time and I was really in a crossroads. I had already left corporate. I had just started my coaching business full time, and then I got a call to go be a VP right back in corporate. And it was a whole lot of money on the table. It was like more than I'd seen. And I was just like, oh my God, what do I do? Like I have this thing that I'm very passionate about. And I have this opportunity over here that could really help my family at the time. And so it was a really tough decision for me. And do you remember what advice you gave me?
I think it was something like, think about what you want to do in 3 months or something like that.
Yes. So explain that thought process for the people.
Yeah. Having a cancer diagnosis is hard mentally on the long-term goals. So I couldn't have, and even today, it's really hard for me to fathom having a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, let alone a 2-year plan. It's like I have to take things like 3 months at a time. And the reason I say 3 months at a time is because that's typically like the amount of time before my next scan, right? And so I have to think about what I want to do in the next 3 months, i.e., do I want to stay at this job? Like things of that nature. And so that's like how that period of time came to be. I've just adapted it to like my way of life. I still try a little better to have like long-term aspirations. I don't really try to be married to them. I think what I try to be like focused on is like, okay, what can I get done in the time that I have, and what's going to make me happiest in that time of that I have. But I also have to like balance that with being like a little bit responsible too, because had I quit my job when I first got the notice of it, you're going to be poor. You've only got so much savings, right? And it's just like, oh, if you know you're going to live a little bit longer, then you have to like get a job and actually work and all that other stuff. So it's like a weird balance for me. But yeah, that was the advice that I had given to you at that time. Think about the next 3 months. Also, I think you ended up choosing the job, which I thought was interesting after our conversation. But I think that was also a right decision to do as well. Because at the end of the day, it's just like how I would deal with, I think one of your questions that you sent to me was related to how do you make decisions with very little information? At the end of the day, you just got to make a choice. You got to think of all the probabilities in your head, make a choice, own the choice, and live with that choice for a block of time, and then give yourself permission to pivot from that. If it's okay, if I hit this milestone of time and it's not working the way that I want to, I can go back and do something else, and it's okay. So I think that's another important thing to be mindful of.
Yes, it was such good advice. And actually, yes, I did take the job at that time. And one of the reasons I did is because at the time, I had a goal. I wanted to get a house for my family.
Yeah.
And as an entrepreneur, it's so stinking hard. So the first thing I did when I got that offer letter was go get my house. And that was it, and I had that job. I think I had that job for about 9 months. I got my house and I was out. And then I've been working on my own ever since. But I love what you said at the end, because one of the things that I live my life by is choose again. The choose again method, which is you can't make a wrong decision. So I took the job at the time because it was the path of least resistance for what I needed for my family.
Sure.
And ultimately, I got both. I was able to do a corporate. This was a corporate job that I really wanted. I felt like it was perfect for me. I didn't even apply for it. Like I was coached for it. It was just like, who does this happen to? You know what I mean? So I felt like it was something I wanted to do and I wanted the challenge. And then still life happened. My son ended up having a rare eating disorder that caused me to have to make the decision anyway, where I had to quit the job because I was working for a startup and I didn't have no time. I couldn't so it came down to me deciding, am I going to go and be with my son full time and start my coaching business full time again. And that's what I ultimately decided to do. And I haven't looked back. And that was 2021. So 4 years ago
Yeah.
now. I don't think you can get it wrong. I think that's the
Right.
main thing. And one of the things I said to you in our pre-interview, and this is where I'll leave our viewers today, but one of the things that I think is really important is that we all have a terminal diagnosis.
Yeah.
Like we're living and we will all die.
Yeah.
I think people who are healthy take that for granted. I have experienced a lot of death in my life. So I'm always really ever presently thinking about my own mortality because both of my parents died at 60. I'm 42. So
Right.
I'm always thinking about if I die prematurely or before old age, to the point where I talk to my son about death. My son has no grandparents left on either side. And so I have those conversations with him because death should not be a surprise to anybody. Like it is the thing that is absolutely going to happen for all of us. None of us are getting out. And I think it's the thing we don't give any attention to until somebody says you have this diagnosis or we get into a car accident or we're disabled or something like that. I really hope that what people take from this conversation is that I don't have to actually get a cancer diagnosis to start living the life I want to live.
Yeah.
And to start feeling how I want to feel and to start finding tools and resources for how to live that type of life.
Sure.
We didn't really get into it, but I do know you did do therapy. You had a gratitude practice, a journal that you use. So there are so many tools. And you mentioned one of my favorite emotional regulation tools, which is journaling. Journaling for me has kept lots of folks from getting cussed out.
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing to do because the journal doesn't talk back and I can tell it anything and there's no judgment or any of that. So what I hope people take from this conversation, is live your life on your terms. And that is what is so, for me, remarkable about you and what you have taught me about even the decisions that I make in my own life is this really how I want to live? And the emphasis is on the living, which I've always seen in you just by watching how you live your life and how you engage with life. I feel like you are very present with life and with whatever you're doing. And I think that is just absolutely remarkable. So Daniel, my friend, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there anything you want to plug or you want to tell people about before we get out of here?
Well, I guess I'll plug my friend who drew. This is like actually one of the first art pieces that I purchased. It was by this guy named Mikki Bey. So I'm gonna plug him.
Okay, send it to me. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
And if there's anything else you want us to include, we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. You guys can follow me on Instagram right now. I'm working on a couple of different photography projects. And if you guys want me back on to talk about some of these specific tools that you referred to a little bit, you're down to come and have another conversation anytime.
I'd love that. Thank you so much. Give us your Instagram handle.
Yeah, it's DAKUME.
Perfect. Yeah. So we'll put that in the show notes too.
Awesome.
Well, Daniel Rodriguez, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I know this is going to help so many people, and I'm so honored that you would share, be so transparent with me, and be my first guinea pig. What is going to be the Trigger Proof podcast?
Hope for a bunch of amazing interviews coming up in the future for you.
Thanks for joining me on Trigger Proof with Mikki Bey. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're really ready to dive deeper, download my free emotional regulation bundle. It includes my ebook, workbook, and a masterclass to help you start regulating with confidence. Find the link in the show notes. And until next time, stay steady, stay grounded, and stay trigger proof.